Like at the end, we're trying to, like, if our goal is to kind of raise the energetic frequency of the world, like, why wouldn't we just end with a gratitude?
End with it. What do you mean? What do you mean end with a gratitude?
Really? Are we recording?
I'll tell you later. Okay, get my quiet mind on. All right.
Yeah, quiet mind.
Okay, I'm gonna set a timer for probably, 50 minutes?
Whatever you want. Little humans.
Okie dokie.
That was random. I'm watching a video series called Little Humans. That's what, and I just opened up my phone and that's what was up. Which is why I just narrated my life. And said,
Little humans.
All right, go to the website. Let's talk about some stats.
Okay.
Because this is fascinating stuff.
All right.
When I emailed my media kit to the sponsor who said, no, pending. They don't know it's pending, but it's pending. All the awesome stuff I'm going to send their way. I said, we're a fledgling podcast. We're just getting off the ground. And so our numbers are about as impressive as Dane Cook's comeback tour. We have... Sorry, Dane Cook.
I'm sorry, I can't keep that in.
Okay, go ahead.
272 total listens.
Wow!
That's across all 5 episodes that we have launched. By the time you're listening to this, there will be 8. 6, 7, 8.
Yep,
Yes.
3 more.
You'll be listening to the 8th one. So we have technical... Well, it doesn't show me unique listeners, but it says we have 93 listeners. And then the little thing that says, this number displays how many unique downloads we expect your next episode to have within its first 90 days of life, based on the first 90 days of the previous episodes. Which is kind of neat.
Yeah.
There's like 93 of you out there. But
think of how much compounding that is.
Whoa!
Yes. Listen to the last episode for that.
Again, if you're listening to this and you haven't listened to the previous one, stop going out of order. You're fucking up my numbers.
We actually have to introduce ourselves. This is part 2.
Oh, this isn't... Yes, we do. Where is the thing that I was reading off because I don't have it memorized yet? Oh, it's on the laptop. I have so many screens. Hold on. Welcome to the True North Podcast. Welcome to the True North Podcast. I can't even... When I do it on purpose, it doesn't work. I can only do good accents on accident. Accidental accents.
Yep.
I tried to combine accent and accident, but it just turned out to be accident because accent is within accident. Welcome to the True North Podcast, where Abby, an intuitive healer and life coach, and Ryan, an energy worker and artiste, meet up monthly to continue an ongoing conversation about personal development, emotional wellness, and how we can take cues from our bodies, minds, and experiences to find opportunities to grow as human beings. No intro, no music, no editing. You get our raw, unfiltered conversations. Yes, it kind of scares the shit out of us too, but it also takes less time and energy to crank these suckers out. Oh, and it's more authentic that way.
Yes, it is. So I am Abby. Good morning.
Let's see. Are we recording? We got good morning. There's coffee. Okay. This is a True North episode.
Yes.
Officially.
Okay. Back to the stats.
Back to the stats. So here's one thing that I thought was super interesting. This tells you listener locations.
Oh.
Do you want to know how many continents we are listened to in?
Yes.
Guess.
3.
5.
What?
5 continents.
5.
This counts Oceania, Australia, but like plus all the other islands around there as a continent. Asia, Europe, South America, and North America. Of course, 97% of those are North America.
Sure.
We were listened to in 7 countries on those 5 continents: United States, Canada, Brazil, Australia, Japan, Philippines, and Hungary.
Okay, I know some people in Brazil.
I know some people in Japan.
Yes.
I know some people. I don't know anyone in Canada. I know people from Canada.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I do know one Canadian expat that's there.
There are.
in Canada.
We've had 10 listens in Canada.
Interesting.
Right.
Jake, if that's you, hi.
And then get this.
What country in Europe?
In Europe, it's looking like Hungary.
What?
We have a Hungarian listener.
That would be a new listener. I do not know anybody.
One person. I don't know anybody in the Philippines. I have family in the Philippines, I assume, because I'm Filipino, and there are not that many of us. But I don't know.
Okay.
DFW is, of course, the...
Sure.
And if you're not in DFW, that stands for Dallas-Fort Worth in Tejas. Denver, Colorado.
Woo woo. That's my family. Love
Boston,
you.
Massachusetts, where they actually probably do call it a podcast. A podcast.
Yes.
Smyrna, Georgia. Mountain View, California. Get this, Edmonton, Alberta.
Wow. Oh, I know somebody up that way.
I don't.
Don't know if that's who's listening, but fun.
Yeah. And then there's Seattle, Washington. Seattle.
Yep, I have a
came
good
up
friend
a few
there.
times. Yeah, so I think if we do an actual road show, we will already know exactly.
Let's hit
where
all
to
those
go.
places. Like,
Yes.
let's even go continents. Like, I'm ready.
Yeah, let's hit that
Well,
one person
let's
in
wait,
the Philippines.
maybe, until...
No, today. We're gonna go today. Yeah, so I thought that was kind of neat.
That's really interesting.
We have like, and here's okay. So there's always a fear that people aren't gonna care or aren't gonna listen or aren't gonna like it.
Right.
And in the very, very first episode, you said, if nothing else, maybe our kids will listen to it.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah,
And so
I did.
I used to check these stats daily. And I think that's like my Enneagram 3 wing, like, show me the success.
Validation. Yeah.
And I keep having to remind myself, like, who am I doing this for? Well, in the last time we were here, I named the fact that it's mostly for us.
Yes.
Because we've both grown a lot through this.
Absolutely.
And so, like, yeah, people are listening. Abby and Ryan don't know what they're doing. Part 1 got 72 listens.
Nice.
And that kind of tapers down, but the most recent one has 42 plays. And, you know, these numbers they're not something to impress a potential sponsor who, like, their immediate kids that are showing, they have, like, millions of listeners and stuff. But for two people who, like, no one knows who we are, we have no other, like, social clout at all.
Exactly.
Or following.
Yeah.
These numbers they're pretty encouraging.
Well, good. I like that. I have not been watching the numbers because
I've had to stop
for that reason. Like, I am doing this for me. I am potentially doing this for my son, you know, to either get a glimpse of me or in some way to help him down the line. And if it helps others,
right?
Absolutely, I'm on board for that. But I also love that it sort of fits into my philosophy that I just like to show up. Like, my business is just my life. Like, I don't do gimmicks.
Right.
I don't have a separate business Facebook page because part of what I do is just practice for me as well.
It's just you, yeah.
Yeah. So this is sort of the same thing. Like, this
public.
I love the rawness, the unediting, because it's just us showing up, living our lives.
And apparently,
so it's fun that people are listening.
93 other people love it too.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It is very cool. I'm glad. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, and the idea that I had was I'm going to do a weekly mailer for all the people that I want to sponsor us.
This is a good idea.
With all the updates.
Yes.
Like, here's how our numbers have grown since last week. Mm-hmm. And because I write the way I write, it's either going to wear them down, or they're going to be like spam.
Or wear them out.
Like, block it. Yeah, wear them down or wear them out. One of the two.
Yep.
I have a way of writing in a way where you will want me to do the thing just because of the way I wrote the application. Not the qualifications, not any of the stuff. Like, just the way I filled out the fucking form is what's going to get you.
This is true.
That's what got the one sponsor who said almost yes. They were like, I love the way you wrote this.
Mm-hmm. Well, it kept the conversation going.
Yeah, it did.
It wasn't a hard no immediately because...
No. They just strung me along
right.
before smashing my hopes and dreams.
However, it wasn't a complete no. It was a not yet, wasn't it?
Well, they said no.
Okay.
And I said, well...
I don't take no for an answer.
You don't know who you're talking to. I even sent an email. I proposed to my wife 3 times before she said yes. So you may think it's a no, but that doesn't mean that I am hearing
not
a no.
stopping me.
Yeah, no. In fact, you gave me a great idea because now I'm going to blast this mailer out to everyone I've ever asked for a sponsorship. And anytime I want a new sponsor, I'm just going to loop them into the mailing list, find their press email address, and be like, "You're here now. Let's welcome our new listeners." And
Perfect.
just make a whole thing out of it and annoy everybody. So
we're going to choose to see it differently. We're not going to annoy everybody. We're just going to shed light on our greatness and what we do.
yes. And the first people
and hope that
to
they
actually
see it.
say yes will be the right people to sponsor the
This
podcast.
is true. Yes. But if we put the energy out there that this is worth sponsoring and good stuff is coming out of this, we will get the right person.
Yeah. And I think, honestly, that one sponsor did their job because it was literally 2 days after our last recording where you convinced me to stop trying to get a job and start just doing this. Mm-hmm. And I think just having someone come back and say, "Yeah, let's talk," was all the validation I needed. In that moment, I was through the roof because all I was getting was no, 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 or worse, just silence. They just were ignoring the thing altogether.
Right.
And so even if they don't end up sponsoring us, I think them showing interest exactly when they did was enough to get me, to build that confidence to really drive me full bore into this. So, I mean, I still count that as a win regardless.
Yes.
But I was going to go somewhere with that. And then I saw AJ.
Yep, he's in the building.
I blanked where I was going. I have other notes. Do you have other notes?
I do, but I started off last time, so I'll let you jump in this time.
Okay, well, shit. There are... This could take up the whole episode.
Well,
Just
my
these
fear
two
took
things.
up. Well, not my fear, but
Your
the topic
but
of
the thing
fear
about
took
fear,
up.
that was the Abby one. This is going to be the Ryan one. So
Yeah.
there are a couple things that I've said that I've hinted about myself or my past and then said, we're not going to get into that right now. And so I feel like now's the time to get into them.
Okay.
So it's
You
just...
piqued my interest.
Yes. Well, these are all things that you know. But I really feel like if people have been listening and paying attention at this point in the life of the podcast, there are going to be some pretty huge holes. And so the first one was my dad. Because our very first episode, we were talking about my dad and his legacy and preserving his voice and all this stuff.
Right.
And then later I talk about being a child of abuse.
Right.
And then I mentioned, I was like, well, I'm going to connect those dots for you, but not right now.
Yes.
And it is a really, 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 really cool story. And I feel like for people to have like a full picture of my whole daddy issue situation, this story is like right there in the middle of he was abusive and he was Mr. Legendary Father. Man.
Yeah.
So...
Can I preface this with something?
Yeah.
The transformation of your dad is probably one of the best examples of people's ability to change. Like sometimes, in fact, wow, this is weird. So deja vu. I just had a dream about this.
About my dad?
Yes.
First,
Because-
I need you to tell me about this dream.
Well, and maybe actually, no.
Maybe
Maybe
you
I
should
think I
tell me
need you
about
to
this
tell. I think people need to hear the story,
And then hear
and then
about
I'll
your
kind of finish up on my thoughts. Not necessarily the dream, but just.
I want to hear about your dream.
So I have more to say about it, but I first think that they need to know what I'm talking about. But I just wanted to preface it with, like, if you think people can't change, listen to this story.
Yes, that is... When I do my public speaking, I need you to come introduce me and say that.
I would love to, really,
Yes, I really do.
because I can say that a lot more eloquently.
You can't say it too eloquently because I'm going to get on the stage and like become a crying mess person. I'm not going to be able to tell the story without crying. Okay, so, all right. So if we do the prologue to the prologue, you got two Filipino men who are drafted into Vietnam War. You have Ben and Gus.
Filipino
Filipino,
Americans.
just Filipino.
Okay.
This is my dad's dad
Okay.
and his brother.
All right.
Ben is short for Benedicto, and Gus is short for Augustine. Very Spanish names. And Benedicto is my dad's dad. So Augustine was... I don't want to try because I'm going to get it wrong. My uncle explained to me, but he was just a badass. Like, he was jumping out of planes, and he was killing people, and he was like just Mr. Soldier Man, right?
Okay.
Ben was a helicopter pilot. And I think he would go pick up the wounded soldiers from the battlefield and then carry them back to get treated. He got shot down during the war. Helicopter, everybody on the helicopter died. And then the war ended and Gus came home. And the way that they handled that was that my dad's mom was left widowed with 3 boys. And Gus was unwed. And so he married my dad's mom, Eva, to help raise the boys and all that stuff.
His sister-in-law? Am I getting that right?
Yes. So if it was me, it would be like if my brother died,
you would marry
I would
Candace.
marry, yes, his wife, and then raise his kids.
Okay.
With her.
Yes.
So that's kind of how they did it. So my dad was raised from a very young age by his uncle. He didn't really know his dad because he was so young when his dad actually died. And before he died, he was off at war.
Sure.
But they didn't have, like, PTSD wasn't even a thing. In fact, I think PTSD got its name after this war because of this war, because all the guys that came home and they had to deal with, you know, the condition that they all shared from having been overseas doing all this stuff. And so his therapy was alcohol.
Okay.
It was just, he just drank a lot, and he just brought the war home. So he beat those boys all over the place. And that was just life for them, was just getting beat up. Having an angry father figure who would just smack you around and didn't give 2 shits. And so that's what my dad and his brothers were taught a man was. That's what they were taught a father was. And he tells a story, because he started this movement in the Christian community called I Am Second, where he tells a story about how his dad knocked his head into a dresser or something, and he got a scar over his eye from it. He just hit it right on the corner. And then he would every time he looked in the mirror, he would see that scar and be like, I'm not going to be like my dad. I'm not going to be like my dad. And then when my brother was born, he was around the same time. He was around the same age that my dad was when he got knocked into a dresser. And he sure did do the same thing and gave him a scar over the other eye. They both have like matching eye scars.
Interesting.
And so then every time he looked at my brother's face, he'd be like, oh man, I became my dad. You know? And so we got, you know, the same treatment as kids that he did by his...
That's what he knew.
By Grandpa Gus for a long time. And he was also, like, we were active members of the church. He was a minister. It was, like, he taught us martial arts. And so there was a lot of, like, really weird things that you wouldn't think would be happening if then behind the scenes he was hitting us. In fact, the memory that I went back to for the rage in the last episode was one of the times that stands out most to me of him just hitting me for something really stupid to hit someone over.
Okay.
Yeah, there are the tears. And then when I was 11, so people in the church were going on a mission trip to Argentina. And back then, mission trips were not church planting. They weren't ministering or getting food and water to people. It was literally just going to door, trying to recruit people to be Christians. Okay. Like, you have a translator and you say, here's why you're a sinner and what you need to do to go to heaven. And then, do you say the prayer? Yes, we made a sale. Go to the next house. Like, that's what it was. And so... It wasn't until after he died that I found the journal that he kept on that trip, because we were going through all of his stuff. And it was a 7-day trip, and the first 6 days were just complaining. Like, all he wrote in this journal was stuff that happened that he hated. He just didn't want to be there, didn't like the food, didn't like the people, didn't like the weather, didn't like the locals. He was just like he was a top level executive at a big old corporation, Mr. Wear a suit and carry a briefcase to work. And so he was very, like, you know, business minded about this whole thing. And then on the 7th page, 6 little words that changed his life, which then would ripple through to change all of our lives. The entire journal entry just said, I think I get it now.
Oh, wow. Oh, that just gave me goosebumps. Whoo, my energy. Holy crap.
No one knows what happened that day.
Because he didn't write about it.
He just said, I think I get it now.
And that's it.
That's it. That's the whole page. So he comes back and he like sleeps for 3 days. And
wow.
And then he calls us into the living room after that. And to talk about what happened next, I have to go back and tell another backstory. So I mentioned that he taught us martial arts. Mm-hmm. He never said this because we never talked about it, but I have a feeling, as a father myself, I feel like what he was doing, it was all self-defense related. And I feel like there's this idea that you can do anything for 2 hours. And martial arts, you're in a dojo, you bow before you go in, you bow before you leave. There's mutual respect, there's leadership, there's discipline, there's this very prescribed relationship between mentor and pupil. And I feel like he kind of built that little mini world within which he knew how to be the father that we needed. And even if he didn't have the strength or the emotional fortitude to get his shit together and stop beating us up outside of that world, at least for 2 hours every Saturday, he could do it. He was strong enough to do it for a couple hours. And then a level deeper, I feel like he didn't believe at the time that he would ever not be the kind of father he was. This was pre-Argentina.
Okay.
So maybe deep down inside, he was trying to teach us how to defend us from the other hymns in the world that we would encounter. I have a feeling that was a lot of what motivated him, because he started a dojo just to have an excuse to teach us martial arts, me and my brother.
Wow. Okay.
And so when you would graduate to a new belt, there was a belt ceremony, and all of your friends and family would come, and they'd have their like VHS camcorders and record the thing, and so all the walls were lined with chairs with people and an audience, and you would do your forms and you would do your techniques, and you would do, like, if in my dad's dojo, you even had to like memorize chapters of the book of Matthew from the Bible, because he was a Baptist minister, and that was just part of what you do. And it was all about self-control and all this stuff. And then once you had proven in front of everybody that you earned the new belt and deserved it, then you would be on your knees across from him. He'd be on his knees because he'd meet you as an equal, and between you was the new belt. And he would give this little spiel to everybody about what you did to earn it and why he thinks you deserve it, blah, 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 blah. You'd take your belt off, and then you'd put your new belt on, but he would tie it.
Okay.
And then he would shake your hand, and we became very good at martial arts very quickly, because that was the only time I ever heard my dad tell me that he was proud of me or brag about me or anything, you know? And that handshake at the time was the only non-painful physical contact I had with him. It was a handshake. And that's what a belt ceremony was. So he comes home from Argentina. He sleeps for a good long while, and then he calls us out of our rooms into the living room. And in my household, if my mom called us out of our rooms, it was time to eat. And if my dad called us out of our rooms, someone was getting hit. And so I remember walking down the hall in silence, already thinking over like, what is it that I'm about to get hit for, and how can I blame my brother for it? Like, because that was just the habit, you know?
Sure.
And he's on his knees, and in front of him are 3 little wrapped souvenirs. The only time the guy was ever on his knees was a belt ceremony. And so just out of muscle memory, we just kind of assumed the position. And he had gotten this little things from Argentina, little handcrafted stuff. But he said, I don't even remember what he said. I wish I could quote him, because I'm sure it was gold. I'm sure it was messy and sloppy and ineloquent and
emotional
and shaky. But what I do know is, for the first time in my life, he apologized to me and my brother and my sister. And for the first time in my life, I saw the man cry. I saw him humble. I saw him in a position that looked at the time like weakness, but now as a father, I know was strength. He promised that he would never hit us again. He acknowledged that it was wrong. And, he made a vow to us that from that day on, he would be the father that we deserved. And then he kept that promise. I don't know what happened that day, but something clicked on day 7 of this Argentina trip, where he just, life and love made sense to him for the first time. And it was enough for him to come back, and without prompting, without coaching, without having a rock bottom moment,
Yep.
none of that.
Completely
He just came back and just on his own apologized to his kids and promised to be better. That's not something that fits within the Southern Baptist culture alone,
Right?
much less our family culture. And then he was a man that I hope one day I start to even begin to be able to emulate as a father. It was always connection. Then there was one day, I don't remember what we were doing. We were just in our rooms because I guess little Southern Baptist boys, you just whatever you're doing it in your room. Just stay out of your parents' there. And he called us into the living room, and there was this octagonal coffee table that I had never noticed before as anything other than a coffee table, but it had this little door that you'd push and it would swing open, and he had all of his D&D stuff in there. He had maps, he had the figurines, he had the rule books, he had the dice, he had all of it.
What is this called?
Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. For all you non-nerds out there, Dungeons and Dragons. He had all of his D&D stuff in there, and we walked out there, and he had already set up on the table a map and some figurines and some little pages for us to fill out our characters, and he showed us how to make a character, and he showed us how the rules of combat, and we just sat there and played D&D. He didn't give us a choice. He was like, we're going to do this now. He taught me how to solve a Rubik's Cube. Well, he didn't teach me, but he guided me into teaching myself how to solve a Rubik's Cube. He taught me how to play chess. He got out his guitar that I didn't even know he had and started showing me how to do music. And he was very intentional and proactive in everything that he had to offer as a human to connect with us little humans. He just laid out there and said, okay, now we're going to connect over this now. And he had
Something
his computer,
you're not used to.
and every time he upgraded a part on his computer, he would give that to my brother who built his computer, and he would upgrade his computer. And then when I built my computer, there was like this chain reaction waterfall of upgraded parts, And so at some point, the computer I had was the exact computer he had a year ago after he had upgraded it piece by piece, and we had them all connected, and we would just play computer games online. They were all back to back in this one room, and we would just fire it up and just play games. And God, that guy was just invested. He was so invested, and he cared. And and so I had nothing but the utmost esteem for him.
Took a lot of courage.
I can only imagine. And so that is how I can talk about having an abusive father and also this impossibly amazing man who raised us from that point on.
But I think from what I understand is that particular legacy extends beyond even your family. Like I wrote something on a mutual friend of ours, Bruce, and like how his legacy of like seeing positive intent in everybody and being so kind and helpful. But your dad's name kind of came up in that conversation. So I know it's so tell me a little bit about his legacy beyond your family once he made that spiritual shift.
Well, he's Hawaiian. I know I keep talking about him being Filipino, but he was raised in Hawaii. And he brought a lot of that culture into our house without me realizing that it was Hawaiian culture, because to me it was just life. But the idea of ohana, it's going to vary depending on who you talk to. But my dad understood it to be the family that you choose.
Ohana is the family that you choose. Right.
There's the family you're born with, and there's the family that you choose. And so like when my brother, he was dating this girl, and he wanted to ask her to marry him, and he talked to my dad about it. And my dad was like, really, this is my brother's story to tell, so I don't want to get too into it. But he basically had a conversation with him about, like, if this girl becomes my ohana, she will always be my ohana. And that relationship didn't work out, but my dad continued to be a father to her, to the point where even in his death, she goes to my mom's house every single week.
Wow. And
they just hang out. And she's never not been part of the family in some capacity, because that's what ohana is.
Okay. Once you choose,
it's a done deal.
Okay.
And I have certain people in my life that I consider my ohana. And, you know, there's a guy that we've talked about a couple of times who is a cornucopia of opportunities for me to grow as a human. And I think the reason that I can't just kick him out of my life is because I already decided he's ohana.
Sure.
Him and his wife and his kids.
Yeah.
And they always will be. And I got that from him. And a lot of people got that from him.
Okay.
That is a thing that I didn't really see him leaning into until he came back from Argentina. There's just a connectiveness to what he brought. And, I mean, he took a huge pay cut to go work IT for a nonprofit, a little fledgling nonprofit organization. And he was happy. Like when he would call and he would leave a voicemail on our answering machine, I didn't recognize him because he was speaking in a higher register. I just realized that.
Right.
Anytime he was on the phone, he would be talking like this, but then like he'd be like, "Hey, it's me." I'm like, "Who is this guy?" I didn't know what happiness looked like and sounded like on him until afterwards. And it's funny because when he came back and just exuded this completely other version of himself, anytime he was in the room with somebody, they would start to match that. It was just, he had a ripple effect that just, he could enter the room and not make a sound, and you still knew he was in the room.
Sure.
You know?
Yes.
And I think
There
that's
are very
something that
few
people carry.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have a friend now who we run a lot of the same circles, and we actually are we were friends when I was like a year old. We went to church together, and we kind of just were one of those things where you just see the same people a couple times a week, so you just call yourself friends because you're doing life together. And then when one person leaves the church or the church splits or whatever, you just assume you're never going to see him again. So he came back into my life a few years ago because we have a lot of mutual friends we didn't realize we had. And so our first like reconnection conversation as adults, we're like, "Oh, I remember you when we were kids." The first thing he talked about was my dad. The first thing.
Okay.
And that's one thing I've found is when people who knew my dad and knew me in another life, when they see me, it's not, "Hey, how are you? What are you up to? How's life?" It's not, "Hey, here's what I'm up to." It's, "Hey, your dad made this mark on me." That's always the opener.
Interesting.
Yeah. When I gave his eulogy, there was a line in there where I said that he was a father and a friend and a mentor to me, but he was to all of you too.
Right.
And I remember saying that and just hearing this like wave in the crowd of people going, You know that sound you make when someone says something that hits you and you can't be silent about it?
Exactly.
It was like this collective, like, like, yeah, he was a friend and a father and a mentor to me too. Everybody in that room. When you die young, you have a lot of people who come to your funeral because they're still alive.
Exactly.
Like my grandfather died and there were like 12 people there because
all of his friends are probably already gone.
Right.
Yeah,
and so like he was in his early 50s and, you know, just everyone who ever knew him showed up. It was a lot of people. And I remember looking out and knowing every single one of those people by name and having at least one story of my dad and them. And all of those stories, the thing they have in common is he was enriching their life and calling them to be a better person in some way. People who were his peers would come up to me and say that guy was a mentor to me. I had no idea. He was working overtime when I had no idea what he was doing.
Sure.
To inject as much good and love and health and wholeness and healing into the world just by being him.
Yeah.
He wasn't doing anything. He was just having relationships and being who he on that seventh day realized he was meant to be.
So do you ever wonder if you can go back and track down people that were also on that trip to find out what happened?
I don't think I want to know.
That's exactly what I was just thinking. It's almost as if what happened didn't matter.
Right.
It's not even the point.
Right.
I mean, because at first I'm like, I want to know what happened.
Right,
How did he
don't you?
have the... Yes. But now, in hearing how he has affected so many people, it's almost like that's not the point. It's
Right.
not about that. It's what he does for each individual and what they get out of that experience. Yes, right. How he used it is more the message than how he got there.
Right.
But I want to say this. You and your brother very much have many of those attributes. You do. And I think that's why how many years later I still feel connected to you. Because you possess a lot of what he had, what he gave to other people. I really, truly believe that. And the same for your brother, because when he came back from Japan and to our friend's funeral, it's like him and I also used to have really deep conversations, and we had this fantastic conversation at this funeral that, you know, to some stranger, you would think we'd been friends for life, the way we were talking, right?
Right.
And it's because I think you were really just both so intentional and aware and mindful about how you show up in the world and how you want to be, not just for other people, but even for your kids, for your ohana, for your family of origin. So I just want to throw that out there, that you have that as well.
You and one other friend in my life are so good for me because you relentlessly remind me of that. Like I was talking to her about my dad, just about my dad. And all she said was, "You're talking about yourself."
Yeah.
Or she said, "When you talk about your dad, you're talking about yourself."
I would agree.
And that's crazy. That is crazy because he was just, in my eyes, just so untouchably badass at being what humans are like supposed to be, you know?
Sure.
But
well, you're definitely on your way. And the more you make choices that align with your true north, which it sounds like that's what he did, taking the big corporate job, aligning with his true north, quitting that job, and then doing IT for a nonprofit because it aligned more with him. Then his network of influence, so to speak, grew. Like, I think you were also on that journey of being a badass.
do you know? So I have conversations with him every now and then. And I know that sounds stupid.
No.
But I know that doesn't sound stupid to you. But
Right, I'm like, no, it doesn't. Awesome. What did
oh
they
my
say?
God. All right. So the most recent one that we had, and I could go into some crazy, in fact, I just told a friend this week about a conversation that I had with him post his death that led to some, I'm mulling over the phrase, faith is treating coincidences like they're not.
Faith is treating coincidences like they're not.
Yes. Because there were some, like a chain of coincidences, quote unquote,
right,
that it's easier to believe that my dad was actually like in some type of spirit ghost form talking to me and doing stuff than it is to just write them off as coincidences, right? And so I'm just at a point, like, we know how I am with my spirit guide. That's the other thing that I need to come back to, is like why I believe that my spirit guide is a real thing and not just a figment of my imagination. But the most recent conversation I had was I was thinking about my dad, and if he was around today, like if he just never gone anywhere, if he'd never died, like he and I would definitely have started a podcast by now. And then I heard in his voice very clearly, we are podcasting right now. And then I had this little like Sixth Sense style flashback to, we were talking about me using his voice.
Yes.
And it's, you know how, like, I know you know this, but the only way I can put it is I could just feel him just looking at me, waiting for me to connect dots. Like he just threw that out there. Like we are podcasting together.
Right.
And that's all he needed to say. And of course, just the waterworks, I've been doing a lot of crying lately, but I don't know where I was going with that.
Well, that makes me happy because that validates my point that you are podcasting together because you are bringing that part of him that's in you to this space.
Yes. That's
part of your intention for showing up here. And it's not that you're doing it for him. That's just him in you that's manifesting you are.
That's
that is
why
your own.
Lion King is my favorite movie.
Yeah. Yes. Is that in the pilot that we haven't aired yet? We may just have to throw that up there.
No, that was in the first one that we did.
That is actually out.
It was actually a legit one. Because you were like, have you been watching Lion King a lot lately? And I'm like, don't make fun of me for watching kids' movies.
Hey, I watch them too.
I love that scene. Okay, yeah. So that's the dad thing. Now the dots have been connected. And you, in addition to listening to me, are listening to Mufasa.
Yes. So going back to my dream.
Your dream about my dad.
But it wasn't like, it wasn't about your dad. It was actually about this very thing where I'm telling you, but you are your dad. Like I'm seeing that in you, those attributes, and you're making it your own, and it is your own, but all of that goodness has like been energetically into you. And in my dream, I'm having a conversation with somebody else and I'm like, no, but he needs to know. Like I find myself like arguing this point, like Ryan needs to know that he wants to be like his dad, but it's already there. He is like his dad. He shows up that way every time. And I don't know. I'm so adamant about it. Look, my voice is like, my energy. That was the dream. It was strange. It was strange, but and then we were in this situation, and in my dream, I was telling you that through this podcast, just like I did. That's why you got deja vu. Because I feel like I've already done that.
Yes,
I did.
You do that. You do that a lot. You do that again.
In a different way.
And one day I might start believing it.
But, well, you will, because I'll keep telling you. We're just going to rewire that thought, that limiting belief.
I just need to get over the idea that he was an impossible superhero dad.
Well, you need to see him as your equal, which is what he would want you to see him as.
And that's what I was talking to my brother about this not too long after he died, and we were relaying our experiences of him because we are two very different people and we had two very different experiences of him.
Right.
And he is locked into this pupil mentor thing because that's what they always were. Mm-hmm. There was one time that they were playing a game that I was never interested in playing, and it was a competitive game where they were each like piloting a giant robot with a bunch of weapons, and you're supposed to destroy the other one. And my brother won, and it was such a big deal for him. It almost felt like an identity crisis. Like I'm not supposed to win, you know?
Yes.
Like it was a big deal for him because it was always mentor pupil.
Right.
And I remember him telling me that through his eyes, our relationship seemed more like we were equals. We were co-explorers. We both wore neckties, and then I tied a cool knot, and I texted it to him, and he was like, oh, I could do that. And so he tied it, but he did it wrong, but it made a cool new thing. And so I was like, how did you do that? And so if you look at the last few texts that we sent before he died, it was just pictures of our ties, just knots. And we were exploring them together and coming up with new ones and naming them. And we would do music together. We would do drawing together. We would do art together. Everything that we did, like it was exploratory for him.
Right.
And I was his exploring partner in the world. For my brother, I have the answers. I've been down the road. Here's the advice. And for me, it was like, let's go down the road. Like, let's start new stuff. And so on some level, I feel like there was always a peer type of thing. But, I mean, he's my dad. Like, there's always going to be this looking up.
True. There is. You know, this brought to my mind the movie Karate Kid.
Yes.
Daniel-san.
Yes.
And I don't know anything about this world, but that's my knowledge, okay? Karate Kid.
Yeah.
But isn't there a point where, like, there's the master? Well, I'm also watching Mr. Sunshine, and there's, so I say master, but I mean more like,
right. The
mentor.
teacher, mentor. Yeah.
And they teach, and there's that relationship there. But then, tell me if I'm wrong, but isn't there a point where you're supposed to match your master? Like that's the goal.
There's that old trope that like the student has become the master.
Yes,
really.
Right.
And what it is the master's trying to teach you mastery of yourself. And so there comes a point where the student no longer needs the master.
Yes.
Not that the master has nothing left to teach, but
Correct.
the student has learned how to bring it home and to be the source of their own inner wisdom and guidance. And a lot of these kung fu movies, that only happens after the master dies. And the master always dies right before the big tournament or whatever that the student was leading up to. And now they have to go do it alone without the master there. But the screenwriter knows that that's because the pupil no longer needs the master to do the big thing that he thought he needed the master for the whole time.
Do you not see that that's your dad?
Yes! He did it on purpose! He was like, I'm going to make you think you don't have it, but you do, and then I'm going to die. Because as long as I'm there, you won't do it because you have a safety net. Yes. And I have spent so much time just processing. Because the question is like, why did he die so young? People, even Bruce, like when you're healthy and you're young and there's nothing wrong with you and you take care of yourself and you do it all right, and then one day you're dead.
Yes.
Like, why doesn't that happen to the assholes?
Exactly.
You know? And I remember asking why so much, and I eventually had to let go of it because you don't have answers to that question. You dance with the question long enough to drive yourself crazy, and then you just have to let it go. But I really think that there is a reason why those stories are written that way. Mm-hmm. There's a very real principle at play here that is a universal principle. It's a principle of the universe that is baked into every single one of us. And I just had the fortune to let it be a lived experience instead of just a theory that I observe and then try to internalize. Absolutely. I had to experience it because everything I've ever learned, I've learned through experience. Mm-hmm. Everything. It's how I'm wired. And now I'm acting like he died just for me. No, but it's, I mean, my mom in learning how to be a widow, she's starting this whole widow coaching thing, and she's teaming up with other people to, like, you know how a Queer Eye will go into some dude and one person teaches him how to take care of himself. One person teaches him how to cook, take care of your house, stay fashion, right? And she's like teaming up with other people, Avengers style, where they each have their one superpower, and they go and they get a widow, and they're like, here's how to cook for yourself, here's how to take care of yourself, here's how to process, and they each have their own specialty.
Here's your compass.
And she was not even aware of the need for this until she became a widow. Right. Because we don't talk about it. It's not a part of our culture. It's
absolutely.
Just, you know? And so she went to the internet, dear internet, I am a lost widow. And then a flood of other people like, hey, there's no guidebook. Welcome to the ocean. You don't have any paddles. We're all in it on our own because no one knows how the fuck to do this.
Right.
And
good luck.
She's like, well, let's
figure this out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so
she's a wayfinder.
Yes. 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 So it's, I mean,
you come from good people.
When people try to give me condolences for the passing of my father, it's just this, you know, the grease that the oil that greases the social gears of conversation. You just have to say a thing, right?
Sure, it's our culture. Yeah.
And my response has always been, "Oh, he did what he came here to do, and then he went home." Mm-hmm. He did.
Absolutely.
That him starting at that nonprofit. That nonprofit is what grew into the company that was able to facilitate the creation of the whole I Am Second thing, which came from him. And so, and that's still going on. That still has legs. It's still, you know, and then, you know, he got a bunch of things in motion and showed me and my family and our ohana how to do it. Mm-hmm. And then he was done.
His work was done.
He always said, I don't want to get old. He would look at geriatric people and be like, you are not living a life.
Wow.
Like you're just sucking up resources and not doing anything, and you hate your life, and you're on a million pills, and your whole body hurts all the time, and you're barely even functional. Like he would always tell my mom, I don't want to get old. I don't want to be an old person. And then he died. Yeah. And my mom's like, I don't either, but I want to live. So she's exercising and eating well. Like there are other options than to just roll over and die. But, you know, I mean, yeah. That's yes.
So I also want to go back to how I preface the story as well. That is such a positive story of change and people's ability to change.
Yes.
Because you take something as serious as being raised in a very violent home and then being violent in your own home because it's all you know. Mm-hmm. And then whether it's divine intervention or the work that you put into change, whatever that looks like for you, I wish it would all be divine intervention like it seems to be maybe for your dad on day 7. Oh, whoa, day 7.
We're going to talk about numbers if we have time.
But as something as serious and as heavy as physical violence and how hard it is to change that, and he did it. And made something so much better with himself, and now with it's still going, like just like I said, through your family, through everybody else,
through this podcast,
right? And so, like if you ever feel, I'm talking to you, listener. If you ever feel that you can't change because something is so awful, I mean, this is one of those testimonies that that's not true. That is a limiting belief because you can come back from almost anything.
And I have one more story to really drive that home. I talk about it like a switch flipped. And in a real way it did. But
which is why I think it was that divine intervention.
It had to
because it almost has to be to
go
that.
That would just, yeah.
Because otherwise it would take a lot of work. But I know where you're going with this. But yes, that's what I meant by divine intervention. Like it was almost like overnight.
This is also a story within a story. But so again, he was a Baptist minister. And if anybody knows a Baptist minister, you kind of have an idea of what to expect as an answer to any question that you would bring to them theologically, right? You kind of, the rule book is pretty simple and straightforward. And when I got to a point where I was struggling to believe some of the claims about how the universe works as put forth by conservative evangelical Christianity, I went to my dad. And I remember talking to him and saying, I don't think I can get on board with Jesus resurrecting from the dead. That does not feel like intellectual integrity to just go around believing that happened just willy-nilly because I have to or I'll go to hell. Like that just, and I just expected him to give me some. He went to seminary, he was book smart, he knew all the things, and I figured he would just give me some intellectual way to reconcile that thing and continue to believe that he rose from the dead. And instead, he said, do you remember the field day at the end of your first grade year of school? And I said, no. He said, okay, well, you were skinny and Asian, so you just loved running around because you were fast. And you did the foot races. And there were these foot races where it was just start to finish, and then you just get back in line. And he went because it was field day, and the parents go to the field day. And he remembers I came to him and I was like, Dad, I was winning, and now I'm not winning anymore. And he was like, well, that's because you're emptying your tank from the get go. You have to pace yourself. You have to think about the fact that you're running a lot more races, not just the one that you're doing. And I wasn't getting it, so he told me the story of the tortoise and the hare, which I don't need to do here. But if anyone doesn't know the story of the tortoise and the hare, you can look up.
Yeah.
And so I internalized it. And I started pacing myself, and then I started winning again, and that was what it was all about. And so then there I am, college age. He just told me about a time that he told me about the tortoise and the hare. And he said, at any point in time, did you believe that a tortoise and a hare actually met in a forest, had a wager, had a race? Like, did you believe that happened when I told that to you as a first grader? I said, no. I understood that it was an allegory. He said, so is it a true story? And I said, no. And he said, yes. It was not factual. But the second you started to pace yourself, you became the tortoise, and through you, the story became true. True is the lived experience of a thing. It doesn't have to be factual, but as long as you pace yourself, the story of the tortoise and the hare is a true story. And so I said, okay, live it out. Cool. How am I supposed to live out dying and coming back to life? Like, okay, I get what you're saying, but how do I live out a resurrection to make it true and then let go of the need for it to be a fact? And this was one of those things where he was on his computer and I was at his desk and he was talking to me but looking at his computer. That's a lot of how a lot of our conversations would happen. But at this moment, I said, how do you live out resurrection? And he stopped, and he turned in his little swivel chair, and he leaned in, and he looked at me in my eyeballs, and he said, look at who you're talking to. He said, do you not think I live out resurrection every single day? And I felt like I had just gotten like slapped on the wrist or something. Like, how dare you ask me how to live out resurrection? And he wasn't just saying like, oh, I did it, but he was saying, I am doing it. He made sure to point out that every single day he still has to wake up and choose not to be Grandpa Gus. He has to choose every day. On this day, I will continue to not be someone who beats my kids. And I think he had to make that choice every single day until he died. Of course, like you were saying, it gets easier. When you do it more, it becomes easier to do.
Yep.
But you still have to be intentional about not doing it.
Yes.
And for him, what happened on that seventh day, which then I'm pretty sure he slept for at least 3 more days, disappeared into his little room before coming out of the tomb as a new person.
Sure.
that's what it felt like. That's what it is to live out. So in my dad, as long as my dad continued to not beat us up, the story of Jesus Christ's death and resurrection was a true story.
Wow.
And in that moment, a Southern Baptist minister gave his son permission to not need to have an answer about whether or not a snarky Jewish rabbi actually walked the earth 3 days after he was killed by the Romans. I didn't need to know. I didn't have a need to know because it wasn't about that.
Right. Yeah.
And then in that moment, he transferred it to me with this unspoken question.
Yes.
Are you going to live resurrection every single day? And so when you go through something like losing your job, it feels like a death of something.
Yep.
And so then you go into your pity party for a few days, and then what happens the next day? You choose.
Yes.
It all comes back to, he was just telling me life is practice.
Wow. That's powerful.
Right?
Yes.
And that's the talk I'm going to give when you introduce me the next time I do public speaking. And it's like, I have a whole 30-minute thing about that.
Okay.
That I am going to take to my agent when I get one, because I did do my homework, but not the way that you told me to do my homework.
Okay. Well, and yeah, we are basically at our time.
Ah!
I know.
We didn't debrief anything.
You know, I'm finding that that's maybe okay.
We have one more thing. Okay, there's one more thing we have to debrief. We have to debrief muck people. We have to listen to that part.
All
we
right.
have to do muck people.
Okay, so
and then we can let that one go.
Start the next session. We'll start it with that.
With muck people.
Yes.
Because we also have to talk about the number 11.
Yes.
Which leads into your homework.
My homework
which you actually
was to establish a way for you all to contact us. So, at some point as we grow, because we will have a website and all of that. So that's energetically in the works, so to speak. But for right now, if you want to reach out to us, all you have to do is email us at truenorthpodcast11.
That's the numbers 11, not spelled out 11.
Correct.
Some snarky asshole is going to write that out and be like, we didn't get to you.
truenorthpodcast11, the actual number 11 at gmail.com. And 11, yes, we'll also add numbers to our list of things to talk about next time. 11 is a spiritual number, which is True North Podcast. Thank you, Gmail, and whoever you are was already taken.
Well, there's already a True North Podcast.
There is.
It's about design, and it's actually really, really cool and fascinating.
Awesome.
I subscribe to it.
Very cool. All right. This is the other True North Podcast. We are True North Podcast.
It should be the other True North Podcast at gmail.com.
So if you want to reach out to us, just in response to anything that we've talked about, any topic that you want us to discuss, then just simply type us an email at truenorthpodcast11 at gmail.com. And your homework was to find an agent.
I did find an agent. I just didn't procure said agent.
It's okay. You made a micro movement.
Yes, this particular agent represents an author that's very well known. Okay. And she started an author school online that like meets every week and goes through what it's like to be an author and all that stuff. And so I am involved in that and joining a community of other writers and going through like a more formal training on how to break into it. And so one of the modules in there has to do with acquiring agency. So I'm moving that direction. I just I don't have an agent. Finding an agent is harder than I thought it was going to be. They don't represent the way that they used to. You have to like join associations and get your name listed in directories, and a lot of it is like removing the agent from the picture. Like people who want you to speak to just go through this list of speakers on some repository, and if you're in the list and they like it, then they pick you.
Interesting.
So,
but it's in the works.
But I made movement.
Yes, exactly. You have to acknowledge the movement. That's
all the homework really was.
Yes, because if you look at it as what hasn't gotten done, you're not getting anywhere.
That's very true.
So look at what has gotten done, even if it's not the end goal.
So do we want to end with a gratitude?
Yeah, so circling back. Well, as I mentioned in the last episode, gratitude raises the vibrational frequency. Yes. And so I want to leave people on a high vibrational frequency. Yes. So I just want to share something I'm grateful for. Then you share something you're grateful for. Oh. And then you, listener, also, wherever you are.
Email us something you're grateful for.
Or email us, yes. So I am a non-dairy person.
Me too.
So when I drink my coffee here, I bring my own non-dairy creamer. Mm-hmm. And we have a community fridge where my office is because it's a co-working space. And I put my non-dairy creamer in the refrigerator without my name on it. And I came to work one day and it was pretty much gone.
Oh, no.
And I found myself getting really agitated, right? Like, oh, this is what I don't like about, community refrigerators is people just have no respect for blah, blah, blah. So I got caught up in that story. And then I chose to let it go. I chose to rise above it. And I'm like, you know what? Somebody probably needed it. I'm just going to go buy another one and be done with it. Today I get to work, fill my coffee cup, go to the fridge and get my creamer, open the fridge, and right at eye level is a new creamer with a Post-it note on it that says, whoever you are, I'm very sorry that I used your creamer. I thought it was...
What?
I thought it was common desk creamer and not, individual's creamer. And so I wanted to replace it. Again, I'm very sorry, Sarah.
Wow.
And so
Was it Sarah with an H or without an H?
With an H, which is interesting. I have a thing about Sarah's.
So do I. Ooh. And the H makes a difference.
Yes.
Ah.
Follow up.
And the ears of all of the Sarahs in our audience just perked up.
So I am grateful for the mindfulness to just, like, that required effort.
Right.
Like, she didn't just feel bad about it. She literally went to the store.
And was it the same type of creamer?
Exactly the same.
So there was a
brand
lot
new.
of intentionality.
Yes.
Into that.
And so I'm incredibly grateful for her thoughtfulness and her, mindfulness, but I'm also just grateful that there's still that kind of kindness out in the world.
Yes.
That's
huge.
and to prove to me too that whole hysterectomy theory, like, I'm just thinking someone's being rude and disrespectful and just using something that's not theirs, when truly she didn't know it wasn't common,
right.
like public.
Right.
Like, she just thought, oh, this is for everybody to use.
Super
and here
innocent.
I am thinking she was just being rude, not knowing who she was, right? So she had a hysterectomy, and I need to think about that way.
Very
so
well.
anyway, I'm grateful for that lesson, and I'm grateful for that kindness.
And you're grateful for Sarah.
I am grateful for Sarah.
My gratitude is I have a friend who I think is just a powerhouse of an individual. One of the best writers I know. And just brimming with all kinds of things that I think the world can benefit from. Also has never really, really had a lot of confidence at all. And very, very recently, I have convinced her to start a website and to start a blog.
Awesome.
And it's like turning into maybe a podcast and a bunch of other things. And it's like she told me recently that she's excited about it, which is huge, because there was just kind of a reluctance at first, like, okay, I'll do this, but I don't know, nobody's going to like it and it's going to blow up my face or whatever,
Sure.
Like, there was a lot of hesitance, a lot of, just like excuses
Resistance.
as to why she can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But then she started and I helped her get started, and it's actually it has a domain. You can go to it. It's just like right now it's a blank WordPress template. There's nothing on it, but it exists,
It's
all the
yes.
back end stuff has happened. And what I'm grateful for is that she's actually doing it. And I told her I am so incredibly we have another hashtag we use. It's UCG, which stands for Ugly Cry Gratitude. It's when you're so grateful for something that you don't just cry about it. You're like snotting on yourself grateful, right?
Right.
And so I was like, I'm so UCG that you are finally getting yourself out into the world and doing it. And just like, I am more excited about that than anything else that's happening right now in my life. It's not even in my life. It's in her life.
Right.
But after so much encouragement from me to do something like this, I'm just so incredibly grateful that she is.
Welcome to the tribe.
Right.
It's been lovely as always.
Right. I don't know how to sign off because we have to do Mug People before I can do my sign off.
I know. So you've got to hold off one more episode
We're
for
going
our
to start
sign off.
with Mug People. We're going to talk about Sarah, and we're going to talk about 11s and numbers.
Yep.
I need to write this down, because if I don't write it down, we're going to be like, what happened last week for you? Let's talk about now. Is this what being a real podcaster is like? Like, you have to actually write down and plan things?
I'm sure they have some producer that does all that, but since,
It's just us.
this is our grassroots podcast here in my office. We're taking
Dude.
we're taking notes.
So it's 11 slash. This is really good podcast material right here. Us both writing the same.
Yeah. Here goes that awkward silence again.
We're going to talk about Sarah. And we're going to talk about... Oh, yes! And... Oh, yes. And...
And?
We're going to talk... Because we haven't talked about your spirit guide in detail.
No.
And we need to talk about my... Because I know there are some... I know there's some... I don't want to say it... I'm pandering to the skeptics, but I do want to at least explain why I, who seem to be fairly intellectual and of sound mind,
yes,
am still talking as though I have an actual spirit guide, which is something that's, I think, hard for some people to reconcile, but there's a good reason. And we need to get into that, and we need to get into your Sarah. So Ryan's spirit guide and Sarah. And there was one more thing. If only we had recorded this conversation and could listen to it later. Oh, Muck People.
Yes. Oh, I have that.
You do have
Didn't
that.
know that's what you're looking
11
for.
number, Sarah, Ryan Spirit Guide, and Muck People.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, on that note.
Bye.
See you next time.